what gets Keeghan out of bed today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, so to reverse a little bit on that, I mean, so I did that professional race at Indian Wells, right?
Yeah.
Did pretty well. Lost my pro card. Basically, for the listeners to know, like in triathlon, you can earn your professional license, which then gets you into the professional field, which then you can earn money. If you're an amateur and you race well and you would have won the race, you don't get the money because you don't have your card, but you would earn your card. I lost my card because you have 3 years to prove that you're at a certain caliber. Obviously, 2 years COVID, 1 year cancer, didn't have the opportunity to re-earn that. And I didn't feel like arguing for my pro card or like trying to get a special whatever to try to keep it. I didn't think it was worth it. I just wanted to go back to being an amateur. So I actually went all in for trying to race Galveston 70.3. So it'd be my second one. I went all in to try to break 4 hours. Like I was so committed. It was incredible. And it was so hot, I missed it. And I went slower than what I did in Indian Wells, I think, or I went like 4:14 or something. And it was a bad day. It was a failure. And that hit me hard. And for me, I got on the scale after the race thinking, hey, like I'll be back to 175 or maybe 180. And I was 200 pounds. And so for you to know, like when I raced professionally, I would hover between 160 to 170, but I could lose weight like it was nothing, right? And so for me to go all out for a race, miss it, and then realize I'm 200 pounds, it was a really dark moment for me to just be like, is this even possible for me to get back to a professional level? Like the watts per kilo, which is really important for racing, can I get to it? Like now my power numbers have to be so much higher to do the same thing that I'd done before at 170. So that summer, it was really dark. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back to my bread and butter. I'm gonna go to running. I know I'm just gonna break 16 minutes in a 5K. That'll be a breeze. You know, I've done 5 miles at 4:40. That'll be nothing. Couldn't break it. I went to a race, ran 16:07. I ran time trials, 16:10. I could not break 16 minutes. And just like for me personally, I did that when. I mean, probably 9th grade I did that, or 8th grade I did that. Like it should have been so easy for me, and I couldn't touch it, and I put everything into it. So all of a sudden, I started having an identity crisis. So now I missed my goal that I went all in. I am trying to do my bread and butter that I know has always been there for me, and all of a sudden now I'm in this really dark place of like, who the hell am I? Like, holy shit! And then all of a sudden now weight started playing a huge factor in my mind, like. Okay, how do I lose weight? Like, what do I'm 200 pounds. So all of a sudden we started doing research. And so that's where there's been a lot of studies done in Norway and all these other things where the chemotherapy that you did later in life, there's a lot of problems that can happen with testicular cancer survivors, whether it's diabetes, whether it's overweight, if it's metabolic issues, it can wreak havoc on your system. And so all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, like I can't lose weight. And I'm trying. I'm training 17 to 20 hours a week, eating pretty damn clean. And I'm like, what am I going to do here? And so all of a sudden it became really difficult. And so one thing that I kind of struggled with too was that, like, for me at the end of the day, I would crack a beer, right? So all of a sudden I started to get into a habit of drinking. So 1 turned into 2, 2 turned into 3, 3 turned into 4. And all of a sudden I kept myself there, but all of a sudden now it became a habit to drink 4 beers a day, right? And so all of a sudden now I'm in this really deep, dark place coming off this wonderful gift that I've been granted. But all of a sudden now I'm struggling, right? I'm in the deepest part of my life. I can't figure out who I was because right after cancer, I still had my identity as an athlete.
Yeah.
I still was, my purpose was to be professional again. And I thought that was what it was. And all of a sudden reality started to hit me. I'm like, I can't compete with Lionel Sanders if I can't even run a 16-minute 5K. I can't bike with Lionel Sanders if well, no one bikes with Lionel Sanders, but you can't, you can't, well, I tried at Indian Wells. But you can't do these things. So I'm just like, it's starting to get farther and farther away from me. So all of a sudden now I had a really hard time, and I went into a depression the first time in my life. I'd never, fortunately, because I always had my identity, I always had an outlet, or I had something. This time I didn't have an outlet. I didn't know where to go, what to do. And basically I just started trying fishing. I tried to do my country things, and it was enjoyable. But again, what is associated with country? Beer.
Yeah.
So you start to get into this really bad circle, right? And so all of a sudden I'm just like, what am I gonna do here? So that summer sucked. That was really hard. I mean, luckily Dre was there for me and was helping me, but it was the first time I experienced depression in man, that was ugly. I would never wish that on my worst enemies. That was, and not that I have enemies, but if I
Yeah.
did, like I wouldn't wish it on them. That it sucked.
Yeah, it's I'm glad that you brought it up. Because I think it's important for people to hear.
For sure.
And that's a part of the story that's probably not the easiest to talk about.
Not at all. No. Especially too, because if you go way back in my family, like alcoholism is a huge thing. Like it's very prominent. Like and so that's why for me, like I felt like, hey, if I just cut it at 4, like I'm still in control, right?
Right.
And after a while, I started realizing that like it was no longer the reward. It was no longer like the celebration of a day. All of a sudden, the habit now, I still had it under control, but it still was. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not good.
No.
And so all of a sudden, I had this habit, and so all of a sudden now, like I couldn't blame the weight on not training, not this, because I hadn't knocked out the one thing that I didn't want to give up. So now all of a sudden, now I'm in this paradox of I want to be this athlete that can do it, but I can't because I have this habit that I can't kick. And then all of a sudden now, also on top of it, you have chemo, right? So I'm doing no justice for myself because I'm in this huge depression or this huge rut that I've never experienced before. And all it was because I had lost my identity. I had no idea who I was. And the sad part is I forgot the promise that I made to myself.